I'd like to introduce our next attorney. Our next speaker is Daniel Cornelius. He's the Outreach Program Manager from the Great Lakes Indigenous Law Center and College of Agriculture and Life Sciences from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. The focus of his talk will be on impacting Indigenous food and nutrition through tribal, state, and federal policy. So welcome, Dan.
I'm going to try to go through quite a few slides fairly quickly. I know we're a little bit off schedule, but I want to thank Aaron for all the great policy work that Indigenous Food and Ag Initiative have done, and that our tribal leaders have really stepped up with the Native Farm Bill Coalition. But I'm going to talk a bit about what does this mean in our tribal communities, and within, I'll try to keep about 20 minutes here. How do we impact Indigenous food and nutrition through tribal, state, and federal policy? That's a lot. I'm Oneida. In addition to working for University of Wisconsin, I also work for my tribe. I'm an appellate court judge, and I'm a farmer. This right here, a little drone shot of a couple of Three Sisters plots I have, one with rows, one with mounds, and I just want to give I know we've had a couple of shouts out for our chefs, but I want to give a shout out for the conference organizers and for Shakopee for hosting us here. I've organized a lot of conferences. I've been to a lot of conferences. I'm kind of retired from this scene for the most part now. But walking in here yesterday, it was kind of nice to see all of the faces in here, and then go in the kitchen, visit with some of the chefs, and eat some amazing food. For the work that I've done, we've hosted intertribal food summits. You can see just a little snapshot of some of what we do. And I think as we think about how do we impact our communities, especially from a nutrition, from a food standpoint, when we host an event, we're not going to give everybody everything they need within 2 days, 3 days, 5 days. Can we give the spark, the inspiration, connecting, networking? And that's what I think events like this is so important, is the sharing, and going home and doing it in our communities. That's part of with the events that we've done, moving outside, try to have the fire, the tools. But I think it is important to recognize where we're at. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on land acknowledgements. I'm not the biggest fan of land acknowledgements myself because it's kind of an easy way to check a box. What do we actually do? What does it mean in practice? I want to acknowledge, though, our ancestors, our Indigenous communities. At the time of contact, according to Jane Mount Pleasant, Indigenous farmers were 5 times in the Northeast, what is the current Northeast United States, 5 times more productive per acre than European farmers of the same era. And you see just a little, some remnants that was in Wisconsin, but across all of Turtle Island, we still have thriving Indigenous food systems. Saw some folks from Leech Lake here yesterday, and I gave a presentation to their tribal council a few years ago. I had this picture. This was Cass Lake, about 1910. And I think it's important to have some of that context, some of that history. Right now, just on my way up here, stopped by one of Ho-Chunk's fields. Beautiful corn there. There's some Ho-Chunk pictures here of getting corn ready, drying it. Squash. Where do you go to find dried squash today? These are opportunities. I know folks do it, but when we go to a store, it's kind of hard to find it. Cranberries or seeds or tools. I could talk a lot more on treaties and whatnot if we had more time, but I do want to go back to this one just for a second. The Treaty of Prairie du Chien was just right down the original interstate highway system. Our rivers, Prairie du Chien, Wisconsin, Mississippi rivers meet. That treaty, the federal government, one of the things they did was that they divided tribes into, here's your territory. And, it was a lot more fluid historically. I know we've heard a little bit about decolonization and our food system, but moving forward to today and asking this question, what is food sovereignty? I think that the past 3-4 years, what a time we're living in. what a grand social experiment in some ways, a grand policy experiment in other ways. And I think for people in this room, we've got some brilliant academics. Everything Aaron just was talking about, we need your help to really be looking at these programs, to be looking at programs that I'm going to talk about in a second, that I've told Undersecretary Moffett from USDA, you guys have some really smart people working for you, because off of just a couple lines with an American Rescue Plan and others, they've rolled out some incredible programs. What's the impact of these programs? What's the impact in our communities? I've lost close friends, family in the past couple of years, and I just think to think back to, this was March of 2020. Granted, it was the toilet paper aisle, but I think that was a moment of people thinking about, well, what if we couldn't go and get food? Probably a lot of us, we got, stashes of rice, corn, whatever, meat, but I think that was one of those moments. And then this life expectancy data came out just about a year ago, and you can see that drop, 65.2 for Native communities of the average life expectancy. I mean, that's why we're here, at least a lot of us, that's why we're here. Well, initial pandemic response from Congress, CARES Act, the USDA Farmers to Families food boxes or Trump boxes. It was nice at the time. I mean, we needed food coming in, we needed stabilizing the food system, and there was a lot of food that came in. But when we got semi-trailers of milk and dairy, is that really what our elders, what our community members want? Probably, well, no, it's not from what we had heard. But I worked for Intertribal Ag Council for over 10 years, and our longtime director that Aaron had referenced, Ross Racine, and then my boss, Zach Ducheneau, they'd always say, don't complain about a problem if you're not going to come forward with a solution. And so for us, okay, well, we don't like this, but what would our own program look like? Here's an inspiration. This is my friend Greg Johnson from Lac du Flambeau. This is his Ojibwe seasonal harvest calendar. And Greg, this is how he lives his life. Here's a picture of some other ones. Got an Oneida one down there. But so really, what would we do if we could put our own together? We did a tribal elder food box, and I want to quickly mention the FDIPR, the Food Distribution Program in Indian Reservations, the 638 program. So 638, Indian Self-Determination Act, Public Law 638. When you hear 638, that's where that comes from. But tribal governance, tribal ability to be able to purchase on that program. The implementation of that program happened in January of 2021. USDA, well, it started then. USDA put a call out. Applications were due in mid-March, I think maybe March 15th of 2021. So we coordinated with Oneida and Menominee and got a joint application going. Right about the time we submitted that, we had a call, and there was an opportunity of Feeding America in partnership with Feeding Wisconsin that we could get funding. We ended up applying for $428,000. We heard back from them within 2 weeks. We did a whole season of elder food box distribution with that $428,000 by the time that the FDIPR 638 was finalized and awarded. And yeah, it was a new program. There's some complexities there. But what would a program look like if we were going to run it? This was, I think this is probably more of a winter box. I should have a picture of in there right now, the boxes that are going. The boxes aren't even big enough for everything that's going in. If I had more time, I would play this beautiful video that we have, but it's on YouTube. If you just search Tribal Elder Food Box, you can find this video. It's about 8 minutes long, and it's great because it's got perspective from producers that are part of the program, from our tribal staff, from tribal community members, and we're doing more videos on it, more of that storytelling as well. These were our boxes last year, and these are our boxes this year. A little bit of background then. For the first year, we started with 3 tribes with that $428,000. We reached 8 by the end of the first year. Of that 428,000, 86% in the first year went to directly to food purchases. Roughly 40% of those food purchases were from Indigenous producers. I'm going to come back to that in a minute. By the beginning of the second year, we had all 11 Wisconsin tribes on board. We'd love to expand it across the whole region. It's just pretty complex when we look at our logistics to be able to coordinate something like this. But we do surveys. Some of my other work with the Great Lakes Indigenous Law Center, tribal data sovereignty, is a big topic. The information, the data that we've been able to collect from our participants in this program, the very first reason we're doing it is we want a responsive program. We want something that's actually going to work. But we also need impact. We need to be able to make the case to funders, to policymakers, that this type of effort is important. But you can see here some of the numbers. The challenges addressed: high cost of food, inflation been out of control, food availability. But for my family's not going to say, "Oh, great job, we love that," if they don't like it. But all of them say that elder food box, that's a great thing. We really like almost everything that's in there. I mean, some people don't like everything, but then we look at, well, what is the household size? What's the distance that you're traveling? What is your perspective of what is going in? And then we look at, what are we actually buying with these boxes? So here's the percentage. These are last year's numbers of all of it. We've got a spreadsheet that we track the amount of Indigenous producers for each of those items. So you can see here, this was last year's numbers, and I need to do another chart here. This is reversed from the first year. From the first year, we had roughly 60% from non-native to the second year, and we went to 1.3 million in the second year. So with almost 3 times as much purchase dollars, we were able to have twice as much of an overall percentage of product coming from our native producers. So this is a lot of the key. We talk about food sovereignty. How do we engage our community members to want to grow, to want to produce? Where's our infrastructure? So, infrastructure, that's a big thing. We have it. Part of how we're able to make everything work within this is the tribal food distribution warehouses, the FDIPR sites. Almost all of our communities in this region have a food distribution site, but what we don't have is the rest of that supply chain infrastructure. And so we've been able to work with partners. Wisconsin Food Hub Cooperative in Wapaka, Wisconsin. It's like right in the middle of Wisconsin. And then one of our biggest partners is Feeding America, Eastern Wisconsin. And I remember at the beginning of the pandemic, we were, I was watching Jimmy Fallon or whatever shows, and all these ads or monologues, donate to Feeding America. Thinking, how much of that funding's coming back to actually to native communities? Well, now I got to give them a little bit of credit. They have really they've been huge for this. I think it's about the best $428,000 for the initial funding to get this going. Here's a proof of concept. Give us the resources, give the control to tribes, and run it. We don't have income guidelines. Each tribe can kind of do what they want of distributing, but that's a big thing that we hear too from a lot of the elders, is that a lot of them really are, their pocketbooks have been suffering, and that we're not there, okay, well, we need to see your income. You got to verify that you're low income to get these. It's just going out to all of our elders. But the infrastructure. Food Hub Co-op is a big thing. I'm going to talk a little bit more about an opportunity for infrastructure in a second. Don't have time to read this whole quote here, but I just had to put it up. This is from Isaiah Skenendor. He's an Oneida producer. I'm a producer as well. I mentioned that a little bit more. In addition to growing corn, I raise animals in a regenerative system. And going into the second year, we're trying to get more tribal producers. And I said to our planning team, well, I don't want conflict of interest, but I raise cows. And they talked about it, and they said, well, as long as it's clarified, and you're not getting paid anymore, we need more product. And so, we'd like to, if you could produce for the program, we need 1,800 pounds. dude, I don't know if I can do 1,800 pounds of finished meat. But I was able to partner with Isaiah, and we're going to have one of the Oneida tribal operations as well. But Isaiah and myself were able to come together and to do one distribution of meat. So that's the scale that we're at. And I just want to go back to this. I was dropping off product, pallet of carrots and a pallet of potatoes. I got it, picked it up from a Zebra Major Wing farm over at Little Travers in Michigan, and they said that this one sale here, it would take us 3 weeks of doing farmers markets, or it would take us a month of doing farmers markets 3 days a week to be able to do this one sale, and knowing it's going to our elders, and then we got boxes going back to them. This is part of, this isn't just about business, about transactions. This is about relationships. It's about rebuilding our historic economies. But when I'm dropping this off and they're loading up this trailer of the food going just to Oneida and Menominee, it gives you a sense. This is food. This isn't even all of the food for our elders for 2 weeks, but really, what does it take to feed a community? What does it take to feed everybody here in this room? I was in that kitchen yesterday, and going back to those food summits, the first time we moved it out of a conference center to a tribal site, and we brought our chefs in. Ben Jacobs, who was here, Ben was there, and I'm saying to Zach Ducheneau, my former boss, Zach, I'm pretty worried we're gonna food at this event, and he told me, I hope you do. I'm like, what? What do you mean? He said, no, I hope you're not a food because it'll get people thinking about what if they didn't have it. And but to put on an event like this, it's a lot, but just think about what does it take to really feed our communities. So back to Isaiah's quote, and it's just so beautiful of connecting everything of what this effort is about the quality of food, but about the disconnection within his family, and for him to be coming back and to be growing on that same land that his great-grandpa grew on 100 years ago. The boarding schools, before the disconnection of language, but to be back and doing it, that pride that he has, that inspiration that he has, back to that inspiration, that's part of what we're trying to do, is we're trying to give essentially a guaranteed market at a fair price for feeding not only our community, but for feeding our elders, and then looking at other opportunities as we move forward of how can we do our schools, and for every tribe, where do they want that product to go. But in addition to surveying our participants, we survey our producers. And last year we had a team that did one of the interviews was 3 hours long with our producers, that they just talked to them, went through a bunch of questions, and some of the issues, the transportation, the packaging, these are issues our producers face. I spent over 10 years doing technical assistance. Being able to be in this type of a position of giving that direct support, that's part of the impact that we have. During the pandemic, when I was working for Tribal Ag Council, we did a survey we did actually a set of 4 of them. And for our producers, here's some of the issues where they needed more help. And one of the things, you look at USDA's Ag Census data, 94% of our producers are not doing any direct-to-consumer sales. Flip that around, only 6% of our native producers are selling directly to consumers. So challenges, opportunities. Right now, I know portions of Minnesota are D4 drought. I've been in D3 drought. That's a challenge. Opportunities. How do we get these programs, how do we get it to support our producers, to support communities, policy. Aaron shared some of this before, but we've got any given year, this was 2022, 2023, actually a little bit low this year of nutrition assistance at 70%. Generally 75 to 80% of USDA's budget in any given year is nutrition. You can see here, and if you want to go look and see what the federal government is spending, usaspending.gov, and you can see here for USDA. So Aaron had touched on this before, but if we could get even 5-10% of the federal nutrition dollars that are coming into our communities going directly to our producers, what impact would that have? Well, I think that on a big scale, this grand social experiment, I'm going to talk about local food purchase assistance program in a second, but this is 2017 USDA Ag Census numbers. almost 80,000 Native American farmers and ranchers, $2.1 billion of livestock sales, 1.14 of commodity crops, that's $3.5 billion. You look at it from this perspective, and I was doing a grant application a few years ago, and trying to quantify the opportunity for more value-added production within our Native communities. So just to break down these numbers, we've got the total number of farms, total acres, total sales. Contrast Native farmers to Asian American farmers, ranchers. There is 1/3 the number of Native farmers and one third the number of Asian American farmers and ranchers on 1/30th the amount of land, yet they're doing double the annual sales. So what this is highlighting, that almost all of that $3.5 billion, it is commodity sales. You look at it in just the Rocky Mountain region, this is on reservation. Almost 4/5 of on-reservation ag sales are coming from non-Native producers. You know, and if we think about it from the overall global food system, this was a graphic that was developed by the University of Wisconsin-Madison, the Center for Integrated Ag Systems. And you know, I just was playing around, and what if we flip this? You know, so you've got the red, big, global, you know, these are the grain freighters, and you know, the giant here in Minnesota, the big global ag companies. You got your Cisco's, that's where most of the food in our tribal communities, most of our communities, is coming in from the red, the orange. Then we get more to, you know, to the regional and to the local and to the personal. Well, what if we expand? What if we are able to put more focus on the middle? That's what we're trying to do. Elder Food Box is one example of it. And I will say, I don't know if Aaron is still here or anybody involved in policy and OTR, if there's one program, I would say put this as a Farm Bill program, make it permanent, this local food purchase assistance, this is it. This has to have permanent statutory authority. And the reason why I say that is when this rolled out in late 2021, $400 million, USDA took the funding, they divided it by states. And then they said if there's tribes in a state, 40% is reserved for tribes. So, and they did population poverty, this TFAP, Temporary Emergency Food Assistance Program. Population poverty is the metrics on that. And so you've got North South Dakota, 600, 700,000 total for the state. Those tribes get 40% of that. That doesn't seem right. And then we look at Alaska. If every Native village in Alaska would have applied for the 900,000 total for the state, 40% of that, it'd break down to $1,500 per tribe. What are you going to do with $1,500? You can't even ship a crate of that milk up there for $1,500. We do something better than milk. So we pushed USDA on it, and we researched and did a white paper, letter to them, a really white paper, and ultimately we get a call to join the undersecretary, and she says, we just want to let you know, thank you for your efforts, and we're doing press release tomorrow. There's $500 million for the second round of this LFPA, and we're doing a $100 million tribal set-aside. And out of that $100 million tribal set-aside, my understanding is that there's been over $300 million of applications of requests. So this is where the tribes can get the funding. Only limitation really is it's got to be within 400 miles, minimally processed. So that's a great one. Just going to hit on a couple other key ones. The Regional Food Business Center. This is one of these pandemic ARPA program, but another great one if it would be permanent. The Intertribal Ag Council has $42.5 million for their National Intertribal Center. 68% of that is supposed to be going out for business builder subawards, up to $100,000. I'm a co-lead on the Great Lakes Midwest Regional Food Business Center, and we're convening a tribal coordinating committee as part of it. When we were working with Michigan State was the lead, we'd said, well, you know, happy to help on this, but all the tribes got to be a part of it. Menominee and Gary Bisa is is the lead for the tribes. I'm working with Gary, but it's our coordinating committee that we're going to be convening. We've convened it for Wisconsin. We're going to be expanding it out for the region in the next couple of months, but that's a great opportunity. And then already talked about 638, but another important one to take a look at is the Resilient Food System Infrastructure Program. USDA has $420 million, again, divided up by states. The funding formula in Wisconsin has 28.2 million. And this is going to be going out. They're going to be doing applications on this in they're saying November, and this could be for distribution warehouses. This could be for anything really of that middle of the supply chain. This RFSI can fund. So it's a great one to be looking at. Another big one is the increasing land capital market access. Intertribal Ag Council, my understanding, has 20 million. We have a Great Lakes, a regional application. We've got 8.5 million. Of that 8.5 million, 3 million is an inventory fund where we have flexibility to be able to purchase at harvest time, advanced purchases. We're working on the exact details of it. And we have a $3 million producer capital equity fund. So basically grants for our producers. And there's going to have to be some match on it, but this is a really exciting effort. Another one, it'd be great to have a permanent statutory authority. Farm to school, and there's been some other talk on farm to school already. This is my little guy, grinding corn, but how do we get our youth involved? Farm to school isn't just putting foods into the school, it's the education as well. The Medicaid 1115 waiver, this is another huge one. I don't know if it's been talked about at all, but let's put money, instead of just into healthcare, let's put money into prevention. The 1115 waiver, this is one of the ways to do it. There's some complexity of how to make it happen. Part of it, and where we're kind of working through, is state policy, and healthcare is just a whole nother thing. But I have state policy on here. Is we can't ignore the elephant in the room or the buffalo in the teepee. Working with our states is important. We're lucky in Wisconsin, kind of, that we've been able to really make some good partnership, able to get the governor of Wisconsin put a budget request of $2 million per year, $4 million total into the state biennial budget, the 2-year budget that was proposed earlier this year. The Republicans took everything out pretty much that the governor had put in. Somehow we were able to get the Republicans to put $1.5 million per year, $3 million total into tribal elder food box, tribal elder feeding program. So that's one thing, but there's a lot of other areas where coordination with states is important. And then in my last couple of minutes, sorry, trying to keep it more to 20 minutes, but there's a lot here to cover, but tribal policy. This is also, we can't just defer to the feds and others to fund efforts. What about our own tribes? And I've got in stars there, support our producers. From my perspective, a lot of this presentation is focused food sovereignty. We need to have the food. We need more product to be able to put in. How do we do that? Supporting our producers, land access, ownership. If it's even just making it easier for tribal members to get a lease to be able to tap trees, to do syrup. Talked a little about the infrastructure, the processing, shared equipment, food codes, of course, is big. But then I've got another one on here, corporate codes. And I just want to briefly touch on this, of these corporate codes. If we got a group of, let's say, corn growers at Oneida that want to come together and form a cooperative, you can do it if you would form like a basic LLC and then operate it as a cooperative. And if you structure that right, you should be able to get the IRS to treat you as a cooperative for tax purposes, but it's not ideal. So your other option, and what most people do, is they have to go to a state and incorporate at the state. Same thing with nonprofits, with any other more complex business entity. So that's some of my other work as on the legal side of things. And we've got a model cooperative incorporation code. And then, of course, language, culture, and we could talk on a lot of this. I know a lot of people you've been talking for 3 days, but that's some basic background on policy, federal, state, tribal. And so I think we've got the panel coming up where we can have some questions. Thank you.